Okay, Alex, what is tip number 3, please?
So I my next one, I think it links back to the first topic, which is the pre-topic mind maps, because it's about activating prior knowledge, it's about elaboration, it's about teasing out misconceptions, and it's got elements of retrieval. So it's about the use of images, but it's not dual coding. You might have had that one before. It's about collage collections. So it's thinking about, again, a concept, a topic, and for the teacher to decide, and you can see how immediately in different subjects you have to think about variation straight away, and some you say, no, that doesn't work for us. But you're thinking about the different images and what knowledge that might activate and how many connections that might activate. And actually you can embed in those images some misconceptions as well. So you can create a collage and get them thinking about that topic. And for me, I would use that to generate discussion and to activate their knowledge. That would be my core purpose. And it would be to probe some of my assumptions about what I think they know about this topic. One I use quite a lot, I use it in my training, is I use it for art. So I take a set of paintings in art, and actually, without going to the paintings from Vincent van Gogh and Mark Rothko, and effectively they're paintings that are expressionist paintings, and they're all pretty much abstract. So for me, the collage collection in this instance is about picking 7 or 8 paintings, and actually I want people's talking, potentially writing about what they know already about those paintings. And for me, I know that can be a really base knowledge, or depending on the group, it can be really elaborate. So, I could, with 5-year-olds, take those self-same paintings and we could initiate talk about that collage. What feelings do these paintings seem to reveal to us? What colours, what techniques? So you could go really simple, or fast forward 15 years, you're working with A-level art students and you're getting them to both activate what they know. They almost always know Starry Night, but by Vincent van Gogh, but they don't know some of the others. And what we're doing is we're just doing a bit of a diagnostic again, but we're activating what techniques can they identify? Do they know anything about that art movement? So it's pretty much another example of that activating prior knowledge, getting them to elaborate, us testing out what we think they know and getting and teasing out misconceptions in some instances, but it's about using images. And why I use images is because for a lot of people's, the abstraction and the curriculum we need to translate is clothed in language, and that straight away can shut people's down and shut their thinking down. So you ask, you give them a word list, or you give them kind of, a knowledge organizer even, and straight away they feel like they can't access that. They don't know what that word means. They don't perhaps use etymology and morphology and break the word down. Straight away they just shut off. I don't know this. You're the teacher. It's your job to teach me all this stuff. I'll sit here rather passively, thanks, and I might make some notes as you go. So for me, the collage collection often just opens things up. And I can see how, for certain topics, that openness is helpful, and then for others, it's not so helpful. And like your example earlier, we want to be more structured and tighter and more focused, and then build up more carefully so that we don't create new misconceptions. So I can see how it doesn't work in all cases, but in some it does. So, that for me, what collage collections, it's got a nice, again, beginning of topic, sometimes beginning of lesson, but kind of an introductory feel about it. And the evidence base it links to, there's no specific evidence base that shows that this works in X and Y classrooms. But for me, it's about the activating prior knowledge, elaboration, and some of those principles of getting them to retrieve what they know, and we teach accordingly.
I like it, Alex. I've never heard of this, so this is good there. So just a couple of follow-up questions here. Just
Yeah,
practically, how does this work? Is this like on a PowerPoint and you've just got kind of 4 or 5
yeah, yeah,
images? And is there any
yeah.
number of images better than any other number?
Uh, so I found for this, you just need enough images to generate connections. So I think realistically, you could begin at 2, but that's not much of a collage.
Yeah.
And so I think the likes of 4 onwards start to be where I've both seen it used and find it generates more of that connections, thinking, collaboration. So in the likes of use another one for younger children about different endangered species. So rather than, today we're going to teach endangered species, actually we just have a collection of images. Some of those species are really familiar to them, parrots, etc., pandas, but then some of them are really unique. And why, for that, there's about 8 of those different species. And why I particularly like that is, again, it activates not just their prior knowledge, but it activates a curiosity. A bit like, with pre-testing. And even if they get it wrong, with pre-testing, it almost generates a want to know. And that can go wrong as well. If they don't know anything and they feel like a failure, that's not so helpful. But actually, at the start, if they want to know, well, I know those 1 or 2 species, but what are they? That one's strange. And there's some funky names and amazing species. So in that instance, I'm walking into endangered species with this, you've got some prior knowledge here that we want to build upon, and I'm signaling that to you, and also I want to provoke your curiosity to want to know more. And we'll explore some really challenging scientific concepts, geographical concepts, but we're starting with images, some of which are familiar, some of which you've been in the zoo and seen. So that's my kind of focus on. It's not necessarily the number of images, it's the purposefulness and the relevance to whatever you're trying to generate connections for.
I like it. I can certainly see how this would be a kind of good hook in. I certainly like the fact it's kind of moving away from words. It provokes a curiosity. I like that. 2 follow-up questions, which I'll ask at the same time, so that they're quite similar to each other. The first is, I'd love an example from English, just so listeners can get as many different kind of ways to conceptualize this. And with that example, would you be able to tell us what prompt or instructions you give the kids when these kind of images come on the board? What you ask them to do?
So one of the areas I mentioned earlier about romantic poetry. So romantic poetry, an initial conception could be love hearts and valentines and love. And love is featured in my kind of collage. So you could have a love heart, but also for romantic poetry, you'd have a picture of a daffodil, Wordsworth's daffodils. It's really central to what we'd be teaching and learning about. We'd also have images of a factory, and how important the onset of industrialization is to the romantic poetry. And also we'd have this lovely countryside image. And there's a classic painting, is it Friedrich, the painter, where there's a guy standing on right at the edge of a mountainous cliff, and he's this romantic individual kind of in this kind of mother nature. It's a bit threatening, it's a bit dangerous. I'd include about 8 images, and they're all corners of the conceptual understanding they need for romantic poetry. The love heart is a bit of the misconception. The industrialization image and the lovely pastoral countryside image, they're key concepts in terms of why you're writing about daffodils. The daffodils is a very specific poem, and the guy standing on the cliff, this is the sublime power of Mother Nature and a bit of the danger about it. So for me, again, it depends. So I'll be doing this with Year 7 pupils who I know would have very little knowledge of Wordsworth, but would recognise a daffodil, whether that's just around their house, in April time or down the supermarket. So I know I'm giving them access points. Again, this is where the infinite intelligent variation comes in. Depending, I might have them discuss it for 2 minutes, or I might do this individually. For me, in my English classroom, I'm always getting them to make a record. That they always need to write ideas down, and I can do that in different ways. And I am less bothered about whether they record that as a set of bullet points or a map or a spider diagram. It's about they commit to a record of ideas. For me, one of the things, a bit like the mind map example earlier, I'm after the big idea and those connections. So I might have a spider diagram. What's the big idea in the middle? And then what are the different ideas related to it? But I might keep it open. And again, I'd work that on the basis of my class, their prior knowledge, their confidence, and what routines we'd already practiced and worked through. But the main thing for me is the activation of prior knowledge, the discussion, and the eliciting interest and walking into a complex topic. I'm not necessarily about applying those keywords or those images in a kind of really very deliberate, specific way. So lots of opportunities to vary it. And I think that's where good teachers do that with instinctive intent.
It's interesting, this, Alex. I keep thinking I've no more follow-ups, but then you say something dead interesting, and I've got to ask you one more thing. So I promise this is the last one on this. If we take the romantic poets example, I think it's a really, really good one, this.
Yeah.
Are you saying to the kids, these are a collection of images about romantic poets?
Yeah.
What does this bring to mind? Get it down.
Yeah.
Or is it almost kind of a bit of a mystery that here are a load of images, write down what you think, and then it's almost like the big reveal that this is the kind of topic we're doing. I can see pros and cons to both.
Yeah. And again, if I've got a year 7 class who are like full of eagerness and I feel like I want to just string them along a bit, I can do the reveal. And I've done that variation of it. Sometimes I want a bit more structure. Again, there is that choice between how much we want to have this as a structured. We're going to do romantic poetry in the next 4 weeks, and I know you know a lot about this already, even if you don't quite think you know. Here's a set. I'm going to ask you to write a set of images. Just write down what you already know and any ideas that you connect with them. So I can do that and very deliberately introduce romantic poetry, or I can hold back on that and do a bit of a reveal, depending on my confidence with the group about, again, prior knowledge about their motivation, whether I think they like to be told something, and then that's the kind of magic of an individual class, anticipating how they'll behave, how they'll respond. Effectively, my key question every time for me is, how am I going to get them to think hard and be motivated to tackle these quite lengthy, some lengthy, really tricky, dense, archaic poems that they don't quite understand? So both variations there, I think I've taught it both ways, depending on my group. Normally, I keep a bit more mystery and do the unveil just for the motivational factor.
Of course. Fantastic.